of all, I would like to thank you for letting me be here among such distinguished researchers and academics. It's a great honor, thank you. Now let me start with two preliminary issues. Psychology, especially the experimental psychology, is no longer interested in human soul, but rather in the mind, and most of all in human behavior. Unfortunately, in some cases, for example, in the case of morality, behavioral research are very difficult to conduct for many reasons, for example, practical or ethical. And hence, the psychologists tend to study human behavior in quite indirect manner. We ask people in many ways about their feelings, beliefs, opinions, some predictions, so we get some declarations, and then we make rough estimations on how they could behave in real life situations. And I will return to this issue later. But the other issue is that psychology in general, and moral psychology in particular, often suffer from some kind of conceptualness. Maybe moral psychologists do not speak of conscience anymore, but they juggle with terms such as moral judgments and judging, moral decisions, moral evaluations, moral feelings, emotions, moral attitudes, moral views, and so on. Happily, as our recent guest Patricia Churchill claims, we do not always need very strict definitions of just to investigate natural phenomena. And moreover, it seems, thanks to the works of Jonathan Haidt, that most people share some basic intuitions on what belongs to the domain of morality and what does not. It doesn't mean, of course, that we agree on what is moral and what is immoral, but we at least know what to argue about. Just some kind of definitions. Churchill defines morality simply as caring for others, more or less altruism. I'm not sure if that's all morality is, but it's a kind of starting point. And for the sake of this talk, just let me assume after Haidt that moral judgment is an evaluation in terms of good and bad of the actions or character of a person that is made with respect to a set of virtues held to be obligatory by some kind of culture. However, as shall be shown later, moral judgments are frequently investigated with views of such questions as what would you do being B in situation S, facing such and such dilemma? Is it appropriate for someone to do something in situation, such and such situation? What should someone do in situation S, etc.? And in moral psychology studies, subjects are often asked to make some decisions. Intuitively, a decision is something what happens between judgment or some kind of feeling and the behavior. And as some scholars may say, it may be an illusion. But still, moral decisions and moral judgments are strongly connected and wind in some kind of way. And they are investigated simultaneously as correlates, simply. I know it's not much of conceptual Greek, but I hope it may be enough for a while. And now I would like to take you for a short journey through the jungle of empirical moral psychology. And let me begin with some history. First psychological theories of moral judgment were developed quite a long time ago, for example, by Jean Piaget and most notably Wallace Colbert. And those theories shared a couple of features. They were rationalistic, which means they claimed that moral judgments are based on intentional and conscious process of reasoning, and here's a proper quote from Colbert. And they were normative, which means that they assume that childhood and adolescence morality develops towards some kind of a mature stage. Most of the research Piaget and Colbert did were research on children. And those features strongly influenced the methodology of Colbert's and Piaget's research. For example, Colbert presented his participants with dilemmas in which moral and non-moral claims were presented on both sides, and then he looked to see how people people resolve the conflict. In his best-known dilemma, a man named Haidt must decide whether he should break into a drugstore to steal a drug that may save the life of his dying wife. As we will see very soon, Popper and Piaget underestimated the role of emotions in moral judgment. And moreover, I claim that their research method is also imperfect, but for now let me jump to the beginning of the 21st century. And in the year 2001, already mentioned Jonathan Haidt in his famous essay entitled The Emotional Dog and Its Rational Tail, proposed a social intuitionist theory of moral judgment. And Haidt argued that most of our moral decisions comes from automatic and fast moral intuition, which may be then followed by some kind of justification, ex post moral reasoning. Moral judgment, including some kind of affective valence like good, bad, like, dislike, appears in our consciousness suddenly without any conscious awareness of searching, weighing evidence, or inferring a conclusion. A few years later, Haidt's colleague Joshua Greene proposed the dual process theory of moral decision-making. Briefly, some of our moral decisions, we will see later, which are intuitive and emotional, others are based on reasoning, and I could not agree more. But again, the question is how to investigate human moral judgments. How did or do Haidt and Greene do it? Again, although they led some kind of intuitive revolution in moral psychology, the research method remained more or less the same. So, dilemmas. And here's probably the most famous Haidt's dilemma. Julie and Mark are brother and sister, and they're on some kind of vacation, and they decided to try making love with each other. It's a kind of new experience for them. Julie is taking birth control pills, Mark uses a condom. They both enjoy it and then decide not to do it again. They keep it a secret, but they feel even closer to each other. And the question was, what do you think about that? Was it okay for them to make love? And most of Haidt's subjects immediately claimed that what Julie and Mark did was wrong, but their justifications for that claim were rather poor. I don't know, I can't explain it, I just know it's wrong. And that's, of course, a piece of evidence for the role of intuition in moral judgments. Moreover, Haidt and other researchers show that people tend to make moral decisions very quickly, like 200, 250 milliseconds, and those instant judgments are difficult to inhibit or change by conscious efforts. And what about Greene? He and his team at his lab at Harvard used tens of moral dilemma stories in their experiments. Some of them have been borrowed from ethics, and let's have a look at the famous Trolley problem by Philippa Foot and Judith Jarvis Thompson. And here is its Switch version. A runaway trolley is hurtling down the tracks toward 5 people who will be killed if it proceeds on its present course. You can save these 5 people by diverting the trolley onto a different set of tracks, one that has only 1 person on it, but if you do this, that person will be killed. Is it morally permissible to turn the trolley and to prevent 5 deaths at the cost of 1? And most people say it is. But here's the Footbridge version. Once again, the trolley is headed for 5 people. You are standing next to a large man on a footbridge spanning the tracks. The only way to save the 5 people is to push this man off the footbridge and into the path of the trolley. Is that morally permissible? And in this case, most people say no, except maybe those who strongly believe in mathematics. And the question is, where does this difference come from? Greene claims that the Footbridge version of the trolley problem is much more personal than the Switch version. And the more personal moral dilemma is, the more emotional response it evokes. Emotions, according to Greene, lead us to deontic, some kind of normative rather than
to utilitarian judgments and decisions. And Greene tested this theory, for example, with the use of fMRI scanning. His team demonstrated that when people solve personal dilemmas, the emotional areas in the brain are highly active. For example, angular gyrus. I don't know, it can be seen there. It's somewhere there. And impersonal dilemmas boost the activity of the areas associated with our basic mental tool for reasoning, which is working memory. For example, both our parietal lobes. And though this impersonal division has been applied in many successful experiments, it remains somehow unclear. Just please let me for a personal remark. When we were trying to design our own dilemmas here, we spent long hours discussing what personal means and deciding if our stories are personal or impersonal enough. And the basic question is, does the impersonal division truly explain something in human moral judgment, or is it just a way to elicit emotional and reasoned responses? But let's leave it for now. The basic problem with moral dilemmas is different. It has been pointed out by another brilliant psychologist, Wisława Szymborska, who once wrote, "We know so much about ourselves as has been tested." That's the pitfall of introspection. Asking subjects to solve dilemmas, we get some declarations. They're probably worth studying, but I think they are not enough. Introspection, Richard Nisbet and Timothy Wilson were quite right, probably, where they said that we cannot ask people to tell us more than they know. And moral psychology needs more tools, that's for sure. And let's now have a quick look on what's going on in recent, fresh studies. I have chosen 3 examples. 2 are really interesting, and the third is an experiment we are working on right now here in Kraków with Professor Brożek, Professor Nęcka, and Dr. Mateusz Hochko. But let's start with this one. Just 2 months ago, Bocian and Wojciszke published an article on self-interest bias in moral judgments of others' actions that demonstrated that such judgments depend on the question whether those actions benefit the judging person. If yes, they are not judged as immoral. It's a very inspiring study of hypocrisy, testing old Oscar Wilde's hypothesis that morality is simply the attitude we adopt towards people we personally dislike. But what's more interesting is their research method. Bocian and Wojciszke conducted 3 experiments, and first of them was in fact a field study. It took place in a university library. The participants who did not know that they are participants were students who came there to return some overdue books. Half of them, randomly chosen of course, were informed by the librarian, who was a confederate of the experimenters, that they do not have to pay the fine, which was in average like 15 zlotys. Sometime later, all of the subjects were interviewed by another confederate who claimed to be doing a survey for the university management. And the survey included questions about the functioning of the library, and in particular about the last librarian the subject had contact with. And subject who did not have to pay the fine assessed the librarian as significantly more honest, fair, and proper than the control subjects did. Both other experiments took place in a laboratory. Participants were asked to observe and assess another person, again a confederate, but who was introduced as a fellow participant. And this person was solving tasks to win an attractive prize. And he or she was clearly cheating. But half of the participants were told if their partner won, they got the same prize. Again, those participants assessed the cheater as quite honest, quite fair, quite proper, of course in contrast to the evaluations by the control subjects. Maybe those experiments were not fully behavioral. The dependent variable was declarative, but the authors successfully designed some kind of behavioral manipulation that influenced subjects' moral judgments. And now a few words about our own study, which is an experiment with following hypothesis. Experimentally manipulated empathy changes the patterns of brain activation during moral judgings. Our subjects are asked to solve moral dilemmas inside the fMRI tube while the brains are scanned. We apply both personal and impersonal dilemmas following Greene, but the difference is that our stories are significantly less drastic than classic dilemmas, which means they do not include some just killing or dying, and many of them concern various kinds and reasons for cheating. Here are some examples. Moreover, some of our dilemmas concern controversial, at least in Poland, social issues such as abortion, mercy killing, capital punishment, corruption, in vitro fertilization, and paying taxes. And here's another example. And our preliminary study revealed that those dilemmas are quite controversial. It means that more or less half of subjects say yes, more or less half of subjects say no, and that's probably good. And more to that, this division, personal, impersonal, seems not to be so crucial in case of less drastic dilemmas than it were in case of these classic dilemmas by Greene or by Greene for most. But the most crucial element of the experiment is an empathy manipulation. It consisted of applying priming stimuli, which was supposed to either increase or decrease empathy. To increase empathy, we used pictures of little kittens. To decrease empathy, we used pictures of money. And we predict that for both types of dilemmas, increase of empathy causes increase of ventromedial prefrontal cortex activity and more emotional decisions, whereas decrease of empathy causes increase of dorsolateral prefrontal cortex activity and more utilitarian decisions. But unfortunately, we are still working on this experiment, so it's to be continued. But what is crucial is the assumption that we may learn something about the mechanisms of moral decisions, testing if and how they are influenced by experimental manipulations aimed at, for example, emotional, social, or cognitive processes. And many recent research adopted the same assumptions. For example, Schnall, Haidt, Jordan, and Clore exposed their subjects to a disgusting smell while they made moral judgments. And the exposed subjects were far more severe in their decisions than the control group. What may be surprising, when sadness was elicited, participants were shown a sad movie, a boy watching his father die. The effect was opposite. So moral decisions may be influenced by emotions, but different emotions, even of the same valence, may work different ways. So still, the question remains how to investigate moral decisions, judgments. Of course, I don't know the perfect answer, but I listed a few hints. First, do not kill, at least too often. Our daily moral dilemmas concern a lot of less drastic issues, for example, cheating, and it would be quite rational to investigate how are they resolved. Second, beware of introspection. Try to test real-life behavior. Bocian and Wojciszke had a nice try, but we may go further. Think about so-called lost wallet dilemma. It's quite easy. It's simple. You find a wallet with a lot of money and a passport. Will you contact its owner? It's quite easy to arrange such a situation in the field or at the lab, and it has been done actually. And there are more dilemmas designed with respect to the first hint that may be easily tested that way. The third hint is quite obvious, mind the brain. So just what everyone does now. So scan the brain, just use neuroscientific tools. It's not that interesting. The fourth is measure the differences. I mean individual and group differences. They may be quite interesting in case of moral decisions and judgments. And most important, the fifth hint, manipulate. I don't mean cheating, of course. I mean applying experimental manipulations such as Schnall, Haidt, Jordan, and Clore applied. Because testing the influence of various factors on moral behavior, we may find out something about the determinants or mechanisms or causes of those moral decisions. And that is the way experimental psychology may help us to explain the mind, I think. Thank you very much.
Decisions are being equated with judgments, are they?
They are not the same, for sure. But still, when we are researching some moral behaviors, it is quite obvious that judgments and decisions are somehow entwined or correlated.
Well, look, there's one issue of what belief somebody has and who may influence. You may investigate with respect to a particular story and so on, what moral beliefs people form about that. There's another issue as to whether they act on those moral beliefs, whether they decide to do something. And it seems to come
I couldn't agree more.
Maybe it was a shortage of time and so on, but they seem to get a bit mixed up in some of your categorizations.
Yes, but I just presented the way it is. I don't say it's okay. That's what moral psychologists do. Maybe sometimes we do. Maybe sometimes we do it as well. I know there's a difference, but that's how the state of art looks like now.
Which didn't occur in your exposition is weakness of will, and this is the case where someone has a moral belief that doesn't act on it. That is.
That's why the fourth hint and the fifth hint are here, because self-control, which may be seen as some kind of measure for the weakness of will, is kind of individual difference, which may be measured by some psychometric tools. And we may try to drain the will during the experimental manipulations. That's why those hints are here.
I'd like to refer to the Trolley cases you
Trolley.
mentioned, the fat man case. And this was in, I think it was in the context that you said people tend, in some situations, people tend to be very quick in their moral assessments and moral decisions. I think occasionally or quite often this statement is presented as if this very quick immediate decision would present evidence in favor of thinking that ethical decisions are determined by biological or brain physiological mechanisms. I think the important question is there something to rationally discuss about, even in cases where the decisions come very quick and in an immediate manner? And I think if we ask this question, we easily discover that it's important to discuss about notions. What are the important notions that are part of these examples? In this case, the difference between actively causing someone's death or allowing someone's death, although one could hinder it. And the next step is that we discover that there's a theoretical background that comes into play, and that makes a difference whether or not we think that these are important differences causing that or allowing. And typically, utilitarians would say there is no real difference. From the moral perspectives, and the anthropologists would say there is a real difference. So, if we see this background, shouldn't we say that moral psychology stands in need of moral philosophy in order to assess the scope and meaning of all these investigations?
Greene's moral psychology for sure, because those are dilemmas typically applied by Greene and his colleagues. And the problem is, as I said, not only that the moral decisions are made quickly, but also they are quite resistant to change. I don't know, that was the first part of your comment. I'm not sure if I cover all your comments.
I wonder if I could reinforce her point by coming at the issue a little differently. Let's suppose that moral properties are supervenient, or more exactly, consequential. So an act isn't brutally wrong or brutally obligatory. It's wrong on the basis of being a lie, a promise breaking, a killing. It's obligatory on the basis of being a saving of a life. Now, Haidt and others give the impression that when emotion underlies or in some sense produces a judgment, it's passional rather than rational. But of course, emotion might simply be evolution's way of giving us a quick responsiveness to the properties in virtue of which an act is right.
I totally agree.
It doesn't always work that way, of course. So she's bringing out, I think, that emotion can very quickly deliver the intuitive idea that you're using the fat man as a means to save lives, whereas in the other case, you're letting someone get killed by a trolley in order to save lives, etc. So I think you agree on this point, and I do celebrate the research you're doing.
That's just the Haidt's point, that our intuitions may be seen as some kind of heuristics which help us to function in the social world. That's, totally agree. Sorry? Empathy. What is empathy? Empathy is caring for others, or just some kind of a feeling. What is really important is experiment. It's a way of increasing what we call empathy. So.
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean. What is empathy? Okay. You might want to think about it.
You need a definition.
I don't.
I would say really simply, it's caring for others.
Pardon?
It's caring for others.
Okay. As for the experiment, what might reduce the decision intuition is making, because most of the moral judgments are done in real situations. So if you're designing an experiment, it would be good not to have it in a lab.
Yeah,
and not to be
perfect.
And not to be an experiment about moral declarations.
That was my point. I thought the whole presentation was about that. Still totally agree.
So it would be good to design a lot of scenes.
That's the point. Beware of introspection, for example.
But if you stimulate, there is an emotional stimulus, and you have to understand very well what is the motive basis. So what is empathy? I think that because then you really.
I gave you some kind of operational definition. It's not maybe philosophical definition.
I just think it's important to think of that to really understand what's happening in this memory.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any more questions?
Just a word on empathy. Imagine seeing someone deeply embarrassed by an event. Sympathy would lead you to be distressed. Empathy would lead you to feel something like a version of the embarrassment So you get more into the subject the way empathy is usually understood. And that helps, I think, to see what the role of these different emotions is in moral judgment. Theoretically, the empathy is more fine-grained in its guidance of moral judgment. Sorry.
We have no more questions. Now we have time for coffee break. Then the next session